Okay. So thanks for joining us tonight, you guys, to our sort of campfire stories series here. And tonight's all about gravel. Um, my name's John Spinney. I've been with QT2 Systems for quite a long time, and we have a sub brand, the Cycling Formula, which we started a couple years ago. And so we work with gravel cyclists and getting them ready for gravel events, and then we run a gravel camp, which I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. But mostly this talk is kind of about, especially for triathletes thinking about getting into gravel. That's kind of the focus for tonight.
Or just anyone who's new to gravel, anyone who wants to get into it. New to gravel.
You know, we'll capture that concept, but also just with triathletes and just how gravel can actually benefit you as a triathlete too. So, you know, just real quick, I grew up in southern Vermont, and I lived on a dirt road, and I used to ride my bike to school in dirt roads, and then got into road racing, and then later triathlon, and then kind of got really into gravel after I was done with triathlon. And it was like, kind of, for me, it was kind of this full circle thing to, you know, coming back to how I grew up. And so what I found as a triathlete, I mean, gravel is it is like the most refreshing thing for a triathlete, especially a triathlete that's been racing a long time, because it's so laid back. And this goes for anybody just wanting to challenge themselves, right? I mean, it doesn't, not that, you know, for anybody just wanting to get into this, there's just so much less ego than there is in the regular road cycling world, the triathlon world. It's very laid back. Sometimes there's no results. These events are, obviously we're in a pandemic, but once we get out of this, hopefully we'll get back to some of these events. And I'm going to share with you some of the favorite ones that I would recommend here in Vermont. But just a little bit coming back to why, you know, what is so great about gravel. I mean, for one thing, especially if you're a triathlete, it produces this bike durability that we talk about as triathlon coaches. And you know, if you want to be a good triathlete, you need to be able to run well off the bike. In order to do that, you have to be durable on the bike. Meaning, when you're doing your bike leg, you're training yourself to a point where you make the bike take less out of you, so you're fresher for the run. And honestly, gravel will help with that. It absolutely helps with durability, because it's just constantly muscular endurance oriented. There's a lot of climbing in gravel. I mean, it depends on what part of the country you're in, but if you're anywhere in the Northeast, or of course in Vermont, it's just so incredibly hilly. And when you're climbing, you're creating a lot of muscle tension. You're creating, like, you know, you're developing muscular endurance, and that's the same thing. That's the same thing that you're using when you're in the aero position on the bike and you're cruising at your steady state Ironman speed, or your half Ironman pace, or Olympic, whatever. That grinding time trial effort, it's the same type of thing where you're developing muscular endurance, and gravel is absolutely going to help with that. So let's see what else here. The part of why I love gravel is that you just can escape. Just get out there, and, like, you have, depending on where you are, you know, you get here in Vermont, and I'm biased, of course, but we have just a lot of really cool terrain to ride. So we have, we call them class 4 roads, and these are just ancient, unmaintained roads. In some cases, they used to be carriage roads, which is really cool. So if you like history, that's another little side thing about gravel. You see so much stuff that you're just like, wow, like there's an old community along this class 4 road, not far from here. Where, you know, there's a road called the Cotton Brook here in Stowe, and that actually used to be the road that was the carriage road, which is how you got from Waterbury to Stowe, Vermont. And it's still there, and there's old foundations there along it. People ski it and run it and bike it now all year round. And there's backcountry skiing all up above there too. But as far as gravel, it's just kind of a no-brainer in terms of wanting to add more fun to your time on the bike, especially if you're a triathlete and you've been sitting on the trainer a lot, or you're, constantly just kind of riding that aero position all the time. Getting out on the gravel bike with that more upright position, you're just recruiting a lot. Just recruiting your cycling muscles really well on a good bike fit. It's absolutely going to help your triathlon. What else? So if you a good gravel bike with like 40s on it, and I would recommend tubeless, you could just go just about anywhere. I mean, so one of the coolest things is you can sort of just be out on a loop, and if you're a roadie or a triathlete, your version of a loop, you have your it's obviously all paved, but with gravel, you can just it's kind of endless, your options for different loops and routes. And then using like Strava, the heat maps, or the gravel maps, you can kind of see where people have gone and start to put together a route. And that's actually how I created the routes for our gravel camp up here. So you could start out on pavement, and then just pretty much like majority of it dirt, but then you might turn off onto a class 4 road where it's rockier. It's not quite mountain bike terrain, but it's pretty rugged, and you kind of got to pick your line through the rocks a little bit, and it's loose gravel, so you can't really stand up. You got to sit down and try to spin. And that's the other thing, the gearing. If you're riding gravel in a hilly area, you really want I like more than a 1-to-1. It's not quite mountain bike gearing, but it's like not that far off it. So like I have a 38 in the front, and then I think I've got a SRAM cassette on there that's like a 42, I think. So 38, 42, and I can ride up really steep stuff with that. And so you could connect these bikes, allow you to just create these really cool loops, mixed surface, road, pavement, gravel, class 4. And then around here, we also have these snowmobile trails called the Vast Trails, which are also very rideable depending on where it is. And sometimes it looks just like a class 4 road. And it's just pretty endless where you can go with this. So, we also have Damon here, who's another cycling formula coach and has been helping drive our brand. Damon, you want to chime in? He's also a lover of gravel, and Damon also coaches up at our gravel camp.
Yeah, buddy. In the text section here, I'm typing in or attaching some useful links that we use. One is gravelmap.com. You go in there, type in your local area, and it's kind of a crowdsourced little snippets of gravel. And so for us, I live south of Boston, halfway between Boston and Cape Cod. You would think there's not a lot of gravel, there's not a lot of elevation, but there's these little pockets and places and things. And so you can find these little bits of gravel and kind of piece them together into something what we call adventure riding. So you might be on pavement, you might be on a trail, you might be pedaling through a soccer field, and then you're off on a little bit of gravel that you found here and there. You might be on a power line, but before you know it, you've pieced together 10, 15, 20, 30 miles of this stuff, and you're just having a great time. You didn't realize, hey, I just did a full workout, but I was never, really thinking about doing a workout. So I think the fun for me in gravel is kind of the adventure side of it. And you don't have to live someplace exotic like Stowe, Vermont, though, it certainly would be fun to. There's gravel everywhere. I know I tell this story a lot, but I took a trip to see my friends down in San Antonio. And the first thing I did is I got on the Strava heat map and gravel map, and I found a bunch of stuff. There were some power lines right by my buddy's house. And in his heat map, there was this little wisp. Someone had been riding underneath those power lines. So sure enough, we all got on our bikes and had an adventure that day on things that my buddy had lived next to and never knew people were pedaling. So it's that's the fun of gravel. You're doing it on your own. As Spinney likes to say, there's no wrong answers. It's really freeing.
One of my favorite things about it is, especially in terms of the events, or the races. If it's actually, sometimes they're races, sometimes they're just call it a gravel grinder. But even the ones that are races, there's no categories. So here's now a chance for a triathlete who wants to get in on, particularly, if someone's a competitive triathlete, they like to race, and they can show up at these gravel events once they have some semblance of feeling comfortable riding on dirt, because most of the gravel events are not technical at all. Well, maybe about 70% of them aren't that technical, and the rest have some technical features like overland, which I'll get to. But my point is, a triathlete or anybody who's really competitive and who hasn't gotten into the bike racing world or cyclocross world and doesn't have a category or any of that stuff, you can saddle right up next to these Cat 1s, and sometimes pros like Ted King shows up to these things and just try to hang on. And that's what's really, really cool about it. And that goes for the ladies too. There's a lot of strong women that will show up at these events. And if you're as a triathlete, having the chance to just ride against a really strong cyclist can be pretty, it's really cool. And you sort of, you don't have to start out in this category 5 system, with bike racing and have to ride in a real sketchy pack. Generally, like I said, gravel is much more laid back. Hardly ever, knock on wood, hardly ever see the kinds of crashes that you do in a road bike pack where there's just a crash because people cross wheels and things. Certainly there are crashes in gravel, but it's usually around the turns. Most of the crashes I've seen, I did this event called the D-Rock, the Dirt Roller Coaster, and Mike Barton had just literally lit everybody up, and everybody else was basically just like gasping for air. And we went around a 90-degree turn, and this guy, his front wheel just slid right out. The dirt was just too loose there, and he broke his femur. And I was basically, there was one other guy with him, and then it was me and one other guy just kind of rolled up. We were like kind of the first ones there, and then we had to call the ambulance and things. But generally with gravel, it's the turns. That's the number one area. Just slow down before the turns. Don't try to brake too hard in the turn. That's your number one area to really be careful. And then of course at the start, if it's a mass start, hopefully, again, I'm talking post-COVID hope here. You just want to be careful. You're not going to overlap wheels early on, just when everybody's kind of compact. You just always never.
And real quick,
yeah.
I think you need to mention though, that if you want to be someone who's going to go full send, you can be at the front of these big events and you can go full send, but there's a whole nother contingency of people who are sitting in the back, and it's kind of the people who are going the intermediate, and there's people at the way back of the bus. And at the end of the day, everyone's going to get a cold beer at the end. So that's the thing you got to remember.
There are people in the middle of the pack. You'll sometimes just see quirky stuff. You'll see a guy with a PBR in his bottle cage, and that's probably what he's going to drink during the ride. Yeah. And then most of these events have amazing post-event stuff, from food, beer, live music sometimes. Again, not during COVID, so but hopefully we're going to get back to that. I'm going to mention a couple of the events that are the favorites, and I would encourage you all to add them to your list of things to check out. So the first one, it's usually early season, and it's in southern Vermont. It's literally on the roads I used to bike to school, and it's called the Guilford Gravel Grinder, the GGG. And my buddy Miles Billings, who's from 545 Bellow in Boston, he's
one of our instructors that's helped develop our youth cycling program as well. So he's part of Cycling Formula.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy, and he's one of the top New England Masters road cyclists. And he does a lot of gravel too, but he runs that event. It's awesome. And that is actually a race. It's not a gravel grinder. So they do results and podiums and things. And, they have post-race food and beer. Let's see, I'm trying to remember the length of it. It's about like 38 miles or 40 miles or so.
40 miles.
Is it 40? It's hard. It is hard. And you hit a no joke 3-mile climb. You hit the base of that after only about 2 or 3 miles in, and that thing is nasty. the event, it's awesome. Another great event is Rooted, and that's the event that Ted and Laura King put on. And they have a couple long, it's a little bit different this year. They've got a really long edition. I think it was like 130 miles, and then they have like an 80 mile and I think a 60 mile. And they go over a lot of the class 4 roads that I was talking about. They have a huge post-race party, like one of the biggest, with live music, with a stage set up. The food is all super, like, they get like really good catering in there. The food is like amazing, and they've got beer and stuff. The two classics that you can't talk about gravel in Vermont and not mention Rasputitsa and the Overland, the Vermont Overland. Those are really the two big events that we've had here in Vermont. They've been around the longest. They get the hugest fields. Rasputitsa, last time I did it, there was probably, well, it was really the last year I think they had it, and it's like 1,000 riders at least just rolling out together. Everybody from the pros, literally you have domestic pro cyclists, like legit, show up, and then all the way through to just anybody that just wants a challenge, just people on fat bikes. And that race is gnarly. It's early season. It starts and finishes at Burke Mountain, and there's usually sections of snow. They have usually a section called Siberia, which is basically like a hike-a-bike section, and it's always snowy and nasty, and there's like a guy dressed in a devil out there running around, and it's awesome. And their post-race party is amazing. It's right at Burke Mountain, so it's in the base lodge, the whole backside of the base lodge, in outdoor area. There's like expos set up. And Rooted has a big expo going on too, with a lot of different bike brands represented. And then, yeah.
Spinney, I just wanted to mention too, you don't necessarily have to start off by going racing. There's a big event called D2R2. There's probably one of the biggest social events for gravel, and it's just a heck of a lot of fun. I know Melissa and Chris can appreciate just something like that. And there's all different distances, and there's all different cutouts. So you're like, hey, I thought I was going to do 85 miles, but I'm going to stop at 60 today. There's capacity for you to kind of bail out, and that.
That's how I met you, Damon.
Yeah. Yeah. At the very end, after that hard day, I was soaking wet. Oh my gosh. Yeah. After I just got stung by a bee, which is fun.
Oh, yeah.
It was great.
That's a great event.
But it's just it's not necessarily that race to start off. You can put the training wheels on gravel, get out there, get yourself kind of acclimatized, and then take on some races.
And these other events, every one of these events, some of them consider themselves races and some consider themselves events. Honestly, it's all the same thing, really. Even if it's just an event, there's always guys there that are racing it.
There's always Strava.
So, and then there's always people that are just doing it for the adventure and for the fun of it. And definitely for any of the ones I mentioned, even though they are races, you'll see at these things, there's all levels, all different types. So yeah, Vermont Overland is the event that Peter Voller's got started. That is probably one of the best events in Vermont, and huge expo, live music, like amazing food, and just the way they set up the whole post-race hangout area it's really, really cool. There's an event called the Muddy Onion in Montpelier, Vermont, which is a really cool small event. It's not a race. Raid Lamoille is also not a race. And that starts and finishes at what used to start and finish here in Stowe, but they moved it to Craftsbury. And that's just classic Northeast Kingdom, Vermont dirt roads. You have this event that Damon and I were talking about, the Vermont Monster, which is tied in with the B2VT event, because it starts and finishes at Okemo, and it sort of finishes right there where the B2VT finishes. But that Vermont Monster is freaking hard. That is like, that is a hard course. It's really a mixed surface ride. There's a fair amount of pavement, but with a lot of climbing. And then it's got that 3 mile dirt class 4 climb.
The wall at mile 22.
Oh my God, that climb is nasty.
Yeah. It's got
That's one of the nastiest climbs in the whole state.
It's got 3 bootleg turns in it, and you think you're done, and then it turns, and you're like, oh there's another one.
It's ridiculous. You could ski it easily. I mean, if there was no, it is like, it's got to be one of the hardest climbs in Vermont, on dirt. The other one that's amazing is this event called Braintree 7 down in Randolph, which is it's a gravel enduro. And we're starting to see more events like that around here. And I think in the Northeast in general, where there'll be timed segments. And for the people that want to race, they'll kind of hit those segments hard, and everything else is just pretty mellow. It's just a different style of running the event. Yeah, so those are some popular events in Vermont.
Spinney, I posted in the chat there the bike reg events for New England gravel, so people can see some of the stuff that's out there. Some stuff is back on, some stuff is back off. I know dates have been rearranged, changed because of COVID, but it's something, it's kind of a work in progress this whole coming year. So check it. There might be, depending on where you live, you might find something. I know down here in the South Shore, we have something called the Plymouth Gravel Grinder, which is a great one. There's probably something in your neck of the woods, depending on where everyone lives, that involves gravel. And there's probably different, I'm not going to say categories, but different levels of intensity with which you can attack these things. You don't have to go, advanced. You don't have to go intermediate. You go beginner. So just go check them out.
Yeah, nice. Why don't we? Does anybody have any questions or anything? Anything about like gear or tubes versus tubeless, or 1x versus 2x?
Tubeless.
Hey, John. Hi, Damon.
Hey, Amy.
Hey.
How you guys doing?
Good. How about you?
Good. How you doing?
Eating my beef stew, so I didn't want to.
Nice.
That's a gravel food right there. You're ready to go.
Oh, right? Yeah. Yeah, so graveling's enticing to me, being a former Ironman athlete. So a couple questions. I don't have a gravel bike. I just got a Wahoo kicker a couple weeks ago. My husband finally, I was totally CompuTrainer up to December.
Oh my God. Wow. Nice.
But I like the ride of the CompuTrainer. I like the ride of the CompuTrainer better than the Wahoo. I mean, I'm sure unlimited possibilities with Wahoo. But anyways, so I'm like a total triathlete rider.
Yes.
But graveling is cool because, one, I am horrible on mountain biking and trail running. I have this fear. So graveling's like a little bit more of okay, it's fun, it's outdoorsy, but I'm not going to kill myself.
Yes.
And I hurt myself trail running a year and a half ago. I broke my nose and I tore my meniscus, and everything. So, but this is something that's enticing. So it might be on my bucket list next Christmas for my husband to buy me a gravel bike. So if I was to buy a new gravel bike, knowing me as an athlete, where that's not going to drain the budget, what do you guys recommend?
Well, I mean, all the bike brands now basically have a gravel lineup, so it's just kind of your preference, and then what kind of deals you can get through your shops and whatever.
Remember you remember how we talked about this? So where you live is kind of different from where everyone else lives. Like what Spinney's riding is different terrain from what I'm riding. So my suggestion is go to the most reputable bike shop where you live and go talk to them and say, I'm interested in gravel, because they're more than likely going to be riding gravel. They're going to know the bikes that are good for that. Down where we live, in the kind of the South Shore, the Whitman area, there's Bike Barn. And a lot of us ride actually cyclocross bikes because we're riding power lines and kind of dirt trails, and it's a really great geometry. But maybe if you're up in Vermont and you're doing more climbing and you want to be stretched out, it's a different kind of bike. So go find your favorite bike shop, have a conversation, and be upfront with them. Say, hey, look, this is what I'm willing to spend, or this is what I'm capable of spending. What can you guys find for me? The other thing to remember is it's hard to find bikes right now. So start that conversation earlier, and so they can start to look for you to find that bike. And have them, they might have some loaders. They might know somebody who has a bike that you can test out. Go give it a whirl and see what it's like. It's a different geometry than your, road bike and then your TT bike. So be aware of that. But once you kind of get used to that, you're going to have a good time.
Yep. And Amy, I mean, don't forget about, Craigslist and, looking at, so many people are selling cyclocross bikes. Like if you're trying to do it on a budget, I mean, you would have just as much fun on just as like a cyclocross bike, and you could probably find those really cheap.
Well, if you have a woman at 5'8" who's selling a gravel bike, let me know.
It happens.
So as far as like training goes, what is the difference between gravel training and Ironman cycling. I'm just assuming there's a lot of muscular endurance, low cadence kind of work. What is there anything that's significantly different?
So
Climbing.
I'll use my guy.
Climbing.
Yeah, a lot more climbing and gravel. But coming a little more to your question. So for years, there, one of my buddies, this guy Art Matheson, he's since moved out of here, and he actually runs the hospital over in North Conway, and he's with QT2 as well now. He's a mission athlete, but he went to Kona quite a few times and then got out of full iron and then just focused on half iron. He was an age grouper, and he did at least probably 70% of his bike training on gravel. And then for multiple years in a row, he qualified for 70.3 Worlds. He's really solid. And like I said, he would do most of his rides on gravel. Here in Stowe, there's a pretty hard gravel group ride every Saturday morning called Stowe Gravel World. So he would show up to that. And then we would usually go add on. And then, so that becomes his long bike day. And then his other days, he would just go out, he'd do like some steady state gravel, just go do like a couple hour gravel ride midweek, just steady. Like, whereas the Saturday is a little punchier with some intensity in there. But the thing is, as an Ironman athlete, it's just, if you have access to dirt roads, which of course there's less cars, so it's safer in that regard, you can just apply the same thinking. So if you're going to go do like 2 by 30 minutes at low cadence and a 2-hour bike, just like you would on a GT bike, you can do that same workout on the gravel bike.
Yeah, and Amy, as a suggestion for you, since you have the Wahoo, and I'm assuming you're on Zwift now, is if you're living someplace that's flat and you want to emulate or simulate hills, is going into Watopia and just climbing the little virtual hills at the lowest cadence you can, before your knees pop, and just try to grind that out. Obviously doing your Z1 stuff, but that's going to build you this great huge base engine. You know what I mean? And then the other stuff, your kind of functional strength. It does beat you up a little bit sometimes on some of these longer rides, so just be aware of that. But as a triathlete who's a very as an endurance athlete, you've got the basic tools already. It's just kind of working on the bike skills. Those are the other little things you're going to have to dial in.
Yeah, I never knew about the gravel mat, gravelmat.com. I'm north of Pittsburgh.
Oh, nice.
Like mid PA, Alleghenies, you start to see a lot of gravel routes out there. Yeah,
Yep.
It's everywhere.
And yeah, and don't forget about the Strava. When you're in the route builder, it will show you the heat maps now. So if you kind of, Amy, like if you kind of know the general area where there's a bunch of dirt roads, zoom in on your route builder in that area, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff, and then you can kind of make a route.
You'll know if someone's been pedaling it. You'll see, because like for us, you'll see, hey, there's a power line, maybe someone's riding that, and then you look and sure enough someone is. But then you could also, I know I discovered a gravel road a while back where it's just a section of road that you ride, but then you notice on the heat map, just parallel to it about 100 yards was another gravel road that obviously people had been pedaling. So it's kind of we use the term adventure riding, because you're kind of just piecing together these little things, and that's what kind of makes it fun. And like I said, you pedal 2 hours and you weren't even thinking about it. You were a kid again riding bikes. That's all it was.
And Amy, there's something to be said of that too, for sure. Like, it's actually a different mindset. So gravel is like a different mindset in a way than triathlon, where it's a little more less structured in a sense, typically, but you can still really you can make it more structured if you want. But I think generally just the nature of being on dirt, and then the way these events are, which are really pretty laid back, you can kind of make it whatever you want. If you just want to go get a ride in, get a workout in, you can go to these events for that, or it's got something for everybody, and like we were saying before, there's no wrong answers there. But
I mean, if you really get into it, if you really get into it and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I want to be at the front of the pack, then yeah, there's a whole different mindset about how to go about that. I mean, being someone who has a very, I'm assuming aerobic engine, there's on the flats and flat gravel areas, you want to be hammering and making up as much time as you can, knowing that you're going to get slowed down on the climbs and probably take it a little bit easier on the descents. You know what I mean? So when you can, sit at the top of your sweet spot, you do, but, knowing that there are going to be other times you're going to have to climb your, butt off or rest as much as you can. The point being is there's different levels. You can go full send if you want, or you can just get out there and have a good time.
Yep. And it definitely will improve bike handling for anybody that feels like they need that aspect to it. Just being on gravel where it's, a little looser, so you're getting a better feel for how the tires are they, are you getting some good grip? Do you feel it slipping out, and being able to react with and have balance, and then be able to ride some stuff that's a little more technical sometimes, depending on the route you're taking. Like at our gravel camp, we have a section called the Gnarlsberg, which takes some time to get through, but it's all rideable. It just takes some practice.
Maybe it's time to start talking about gravel camp and what that's about.
Let's talk about some Vermont gravel camp up in here. So we started our gravel camp in, let's see, Damon, the first year of it was 2018, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've run it in 2018 and 2019. And it's a very unique camp. We have an off-road sag truck with all the fuel and tools. I've been running camps for like 10 years with QT2, and it's by far the most fun of any camp I've ever done or been a part of. Riders arrive on Friday at lunchtime, and we do a little overview of what camp's all about, and then we go out and do about a 3-hour ride. Lots of class 4, lots of climbing, and then we have dinner, and we have a beer. We had a beer tasting. We do a big thing with the Vermont craft beer at gravel camp, so that people can kind of just check out the different Vermont beers, and there's just so many of them, it's ridiculous. And we had a friend of ours that is a beer master, a brewmaster. He did a talk that one of those nights, I think the first night maybe, or maybe it was the second.
Saturday night from Idle Time.
From Idle Time. So the first day is a 3-hour ride, lots of climbing. Second day, we get up, breakfast early, and we end up you're on the bike for about 8 to 9 hours. And you're not riding the whole entire time, but you're riding for a lot of that. And we stop and get lunch and food and fuel in the sag truck. The riders that we get, so each camp, I think we had in the range of 10 to 15 riders, and we have beginners. We had very much had some beginners, and then we had some more experienced riders, and we really try to differentiate to make it work for everybody. And this year we're going to be doing 2 off-road sag trucks, so that we can have a little bit more of a split with the two. We'll kind of roughly put people into 2 groups for the big day. And then one of those days will be less technical. There'll be an option to have a slightly less technical ride than the Gnarlsberg ride if somebody wants that. That's why we wanted to be able to have 2 sags. And the sag truck goes right on these old class 4 roads. It's like sideways going through mud, and it's like, that's actually my favorite part.
Spinney, I put the link to the photos in there. So all those photos in that photo link from Google Photos, those are photos from our actual campers. And so you'll see pictures of the sag. At one point, we got the sag stuck in a mud hole and had to winch it out. I mean, all those kind of things happen. But you'll see, like, everyone's having fun. They're suffering like you wouldn't believe on some of those climbs, but they're still smiling. Everyone's loving it. And I think the other thing to mention, Spin, is that on that first day, that first 3-hour ride, we kind of, there's Spinney and I are obviously there. There's a bunch of guest coaches around, and we kind of look at people, we have conversations, and you kind of see like, okay, you're going to be here, you're going to be over that. And it kind of organically splits into these 2 little tribes. But that's good. That's what it's about. So you never feel like you're, above your head in water. You're always, we want to be safe. We want you to have a good time, but we also, the capacity to teach you those things that you need to learn on the bike.
Yep. And then so Damon and I are there as coaches, and then we have a whole slew of guest coaches that are basically some of my gravel buddies from the Saturday ride, but they're all really knowledgeable. Also pretty much our bike mechanics. So if something happens, they have tools on them to be able to help. And like I said, there's like 4 or 5 of these guest coaches, and they sort of spread out across everybody. Mike Barton, who is just like my hero. He usually comes, and he's like an amazing coach and rider, like one of the most accomplished riders in the whole East. And so we have him there, and he's won the Vermont Overland before, so he gave a presentation on kind of like the intel of the course, because the Vermont Overland has they call them pave sectors, and there's like 4 or 5 of these sectors that are anywhere from like a mile to 2 miles long, and they're really technical, muddy sometimes, and he gave a little overview of that. So Saturday's a big day. We get back, we eat a ton. There's craft beer to sample, and everybody's hanging out. We usually have Normatec booths there for recovery. And then Sunday is another pretty big ride, 3 to 4 hour ride. A little more pavement mixed in. We usually do a really cool Smuggler's Notch loop, which is just beautiful. And there's a donut stop in there. Damon, we didn't actually do the donut stop, but that's the thing we're going to start doing, because there's a spot we're going to go right by.
I like donuts. You're allowed to eat all the carbs you want at gravel camp too. All the carbs. You can eat all of them. Everything. Yep.
At any rate, yeah, the gravel camp is really fun. If you're wanting some additional, it's early August. If you're doing any late season racing in the fall and just want a good boost of fitness and adventure, that camp will definitely get you there. We did about 16,000 feet of climbing in the 2.5 days, which is pretty solid. And it's a good time.
So Spinney, I'm copying some stuff on gravel camp in there. There's the photo app. There's the recap that is that PDF that has all the stats of what we did if people are interested. It's going to be a really hard camp, but I mean, the majority of people that show up there are pretty fit to begin with. So it's really just kind of getting over that kind of hump of, can I do this? Yes, you can do this. I know Spinney and I have talked about it. In our first gravel camp, we had a group of gals from New Jersey. I was thinking in particular of, was it Denise and was it Amy? Megan? No.
I can't remember.
But those, at the time, when they came to camp, they had never done anything that hard in their life. Yep. That was after camp, that was the hardest thing that they'd ever done. Now, years later, we see them on Strava, and they're doing crazy things. Like, I think Denise went to like Ireland for a week and rode gravel. I mean, this is like kind of the gateway for them to go on to bigger, better, and more incredible things.
So if you guys look in the chat and you click that link for the Cycling Formula Gravel recap, and just pull up that first slide, that's part of the Narlsberg. And the reason that the camp, I think, has a very good learning component is we break it down. So we don't just try to keep riding continuously. We will stop, and we do actually coaching out there on the Narlsberg. So if there's a rocky, kind of nasty little section, we'll stop before it, and we kind of talk about the line, and people start to learn. We actually, I think it was Damon's idea, we had lasers. We had lasers, no joke. And we would sort of show everybody kind of the line, and then you'd go ride it, and then you'd come back and do it again. So it was a level of practice and skill development
sessioning
to this camp. It was we sessioned little parts of the Narlsberg. And the Narlsberg is a 6-mile section of some of the nastiest, like class 4 road anywhere.
It's a rite of passage.
But the thing is, like I said, like Damon was saying too, we really had very beginners in there mixed in with some more experienced riders, and we made it work for, they did it. I mean, you just got to break it down. I run into this back when I was to teach skiing as well. Like, you just sort of have to, it might look like something that's not surmountable, but that you just break it down and kind of take it slow and pick it apart, and then you can do it.
Hey, Tim, I mean, Spinney, I want to say is that none of us, came out of the womb knowing how to, get our front wheels over logs and bunny hop and do some of these other. No, you get out there and try it, and you might not succeed the first time, the second time, but then after a while, you're like, hey, I can do this. As long as I get my front wheel over, the rest is going to follow. And it just takes practice, and trial and error. And at some point, it just becomes second nature. But it's not like any of us, knew how to do this from the get-go. No, we kept trying it. And then suddenly it was something like, yeah, this is fun. I'm going to keep doing this.
Yep. Any questions about gravel camp at all, or anything we've gone over?
Guys, when do you expect to, like, how late can you actually sign up for the gravel camp? Because summer's up in the air now.
A week or two?
I think the last couple camps would fill up like within a week or two.
The
Okay.
other aspect is just keeping tabs on, start a conversation with the Golden Eagle, call them and just make sure they don't fill up. There are other places to stay, but there's a great deal we've gotten with them. So just make sure you've got, the lodging aspect, taken care of. Obviously we can, the logistics of figuring out another person with the SAGs and dinners and lunches, that can be worked out. But if we don't have a bed for you, you know what I mean, right there, then it gets a little bit harder. So,
and Brian, if you're concerned about it, maybe, just reach out to Damon or I, like in a couple, a month or two or something, and we can just let you know how many people are registered.
Right,
I don't like to have a camp that gets too big. So, I think an ideal size is about 15 riders, with a good mix of coaches. Otherwise, it just can get too big and a little disorganized. So,
with that said, the reason we're having 2 SAGs is the idea that if we have to split into 2 groups with about 3 to 4 coaches per group and 2 different SAGs, we have the capacity to do that, especially if we see like, hey, this one group is a lot more intermediate and beginner, and this other group is a lot more, expert and advanced. That's fine. We want to give the best camp experience to all campers that we can. And so to that end, we're going to, as Cycling Formula, have the most assets in place so that we can do that. So don't let that be something that, like hinders you. I know Amy's like worrying, can I do this? Yes, you could do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Spinney, when I met you at the Tri Camp about, 16 months ago, you were telling me all about gravel and everything. And so I've been doing it for about a year now, and it's been fantastic. So that was a great steer. And to be able to go out and ride 50 miles and not have to worry about getting hit by a car is just completely liberating.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just
amazing. It's so de-stressing too. You just get out there and love it. That's awesome that you've been getting into it, Brian.
Yeah. I got one for myself. I got one for each of my 3 kids, and we go out and ride together, and it's really been good.
Nice.
Oh, that's
nice.
Cool.
Bring them to camp. You guys get your own room.
I might. They'll show me up, but
That's all right. You can sit in the back of the bus with us.
The other thing is there's a lot of stuff for families up here. So there would be plenty. The Golden Eagle is right next to a mountain bike trail network, which is also, you can hike on it though and walk out there. Stowe just has so much to do though, for family stuff.
Yeah.
But,
the Golden Eagle even has a stocked fishing pond behind it, so you can go fishing there with your kids.
Nice.
Any other questions? Jeff, any questions? Amy?
No, this was great. Really appreciate all the info, and hopefully I can squeeze into camp this year. We'll see.
Nice.
You'll love it, Jeff.
I imagine so.
You'll really love it.
Hey, the other thing you didn't speak about, Spinney, with gravel as a whole, but in particular with gravel camp, but maybe it's because it permeates throughout all of gravel, is camaraderie. And it's something that, as triathletes, when you're in your aero bars and you got your blinders on and you're not allowed to draft, or you're in the pool with your face down and you can't talk, that's not gravel. Like, it's very social. You're chit-chatting, talking. It's one of those kind of things where it's a group event, and it's before the bike, on the bike, after the bike. And so I think that's the thing that's addictive, the most addictive. Obviously, riding your bike fast down gravel roads is fun, but it's hanging out with, a bunch of friends. And I tell this thing, there's a guy, Tucker Walsh. I must have ridden with Tucker Walsh 10 times in gravel events and races and never seen him outside of that scenario. I've never met him in regular life, but he's always like, anytime at a gravel event, I see Tucker, we end up pedaling together and have a great time. And he's just like my ride day buddy. And those kind of things and experiences are something that's kind of intrinsic to the gravel experience and why it's so much fun. That overall camaraderie and just, as we like to joke, and Chris Kahansky will laugh about it, riding bikes and shit. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. And lastly, don't forget, especially if you're, coming from the triathlon world or just want to have a big goal, gravel has some big events like Dirty Kansas 200, the Land Run 100. There's some of these big events that are
Steamboat.
Steamboat, that are worth, kind of a big training focus on, kind of thing, and having a big build up or, in your training for it.
Well, as Kerbo calls them, I mean, so in road cycling, there are what you call the monuments, and in gravel, there are now what is being called the monuments of gravel cycling. So if you're someone who's like, hey, I want to have some goals, I want to have some carrots in my life, I want some things to achieve, there are certainly the monuments in gravel that you can kind of knock off. A couple of them are up here in New England. The others, you got to go out west, but hey, you're here, it's a great place to start, and something to consider. So if that's, if you're coming from Ironman and you're looking for those really big prizes, yeah, there's definitely that out there for you.
Yeah, I actually raced Steamboat Gravel in its first year, and I raced the Black Course. It was awesome. Yeah. It was such
How many
an
miles was
unbelievable
that?
race. It was 140.
Wow.
That's it?
Yeah, right.
That's no joke.
It was awesome.
At elevation, 140 at elevation.
Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, that's solid.
We should get you guest coach in the camp.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. All right. Well, anybody got any more questions or thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
And, don't hesitate to reach out to Damon or I if you have any questions about any of this stuff.
You can always email services at the Cycling Formula. It's a great way. Yeah, all the emails on the bottom of the Cycling Formula website. You got this link. Obviously, you're in the QT2 world, so you understand how to do that. But yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
a lot,
guys.
guys.
Thanks, Spinney. Thanks, Damon.
Yeah, buddy.
Take care.
Good
Later,
night.
Spinney.
Bye, guys.
All right. See you guys. See you, Damon.
See you. Have a good one.
You too.
Good job, buddy.
Thanks. You too.
Chris Kahansky, what are you doing, buddy? Oh, he's